Israel now to look for the lost cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, in the book of Luke, chapter 17, verses 26 and 27 says this: "Just as it was in the days of Noah, so also will it be in the days of the Son of Man." And we covered this on Friday, how the story of Noah's Ark tells us what's going to happen in the last days. People were eating, drinking, marrying, and being given in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. Then the flood came and destroyed them all. It was the same in the days of Lot. People were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building. But the day Lot left Sodom, fire and sulfur rained down from heaven and destroyed them all. It will be just like this on the day the Son of Man is revealed. And when it says the Son of Man being revealed, it's talking about the second coming of Jesus. In Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 49 and 50. "Now this was the sin of Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant." Do you know anyone who's arrogant? Arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore I did away with them, as you have seen. It's not a good description, is it? But it's a bit like what happens today, isn't it? We're arrogant, we're overfed, unconcerned, and we don't help the poor and the needy. In Jude chapter 1 verse 7, "Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion, and they serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire." Now, just a sidetrack, has anyone ever heard of when you die you burn forever and ever and ever and ever if you don't believe in God? Have you heard that? That you go to hell and you burn forever, okay? And it talks about an eternal fire. But here we see that Sodom and Gomorrah is an example of eternal fire. Do we see any places where there's eternal fire? Burning and burning and burning? No. We don't have time to go into it this evening, but just to suffice to say that when you die, you don't go to hell straight away, and you don't go to heaven straight away, and you don't burn forever and ever and ever. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 5 and 6, "If God did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes and made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly." So first of all, we want to note that they were burned to ashes. And also that it was made as an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. "And if he rescued Lot, a righteous man, who was distressed by the filthy lives of lawless men, for that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. If this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue godly men from trials and to hold the unrighteous for punishment until the day of judgment." Sounds quite solemn, doesn't it? Now, the story starts with Abraham. There was a fight between the shepherds of Abraham and the shepherds of Lot. Lot was the nephew of Abraham. And we find this in the book of Genesis chapter 13, verses 8 and 9. "And Abraham said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left." So here you see relatives. Do you ever have fights with your relatives? So here we have a fight between relatives, and they're saying, let there not be strife, let there not be anger between us. Whichever way you go, I'll go the opposite direction so that we can have peace. So he gives Lot the choice of what land he wants to go and take his sheep. "And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord." So Lot looks around and he thinks of his own self-interest. So he thinks, what's the best land? So he looks over to the land which is towards Sodom and Gomorrah. And he says, that's the best land. That's where I'm going to go, to the best land. He wasn't really concerned about Abraham, his uncle. He was concerned about his own wealth, his own pocket. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Abraham went the opposite way. Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. Notice it says cities of the plain. Okay? Cities of the plain. And he pitched his tent towards Sodom. Now the inhabitants had abundant food and leisure time. So in Ezekiel 16:49 it says, behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom, pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her and in her daughters, neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. It's in Genesis 13:13. And Lot, dwelling among them in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with the unlawful deeds. But who chose to pitch his tents in Sodom? He did, didn't he? So all stems down, right from day one, it's all to do with our choice. What we choose to do. He chose to take the cities of the plain, and every day now he realizes he made a mistake, because he's just so sick of everything that's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. In fact, do you know where we get the word sodomy from? We get it from Sodom and Gomorrah because that's what they practiced in these cities. Then the story tells us in the book of Genesis that the cities of the plain, cities of the plain, was attacked by some enemies. We find this story in Genesis chapter 14, verses 2 to 3. These made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeba, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. So how many kings do we count there? 5. So we're told how many cities there were in the plain. 5. There were 5 cities in the plain. And all these were joined together in the Vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. In other words, which is the Dead Sea that we find today. And then they were captured. These prisoners included Lot and his family. Now, when Abraham heard that his relative nephew, Lot, was captured, he embarked on a mission to rescue him with just 318 people. And he rescued the whole slaves, everyone captive. He rescued them with just 318 armed servants. And Abraham said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the most high God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abraham rich. So, when all the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities are rescued by Abraham, the king of Sodom wants to reward Abraham. But Abraham's saying, I don't want your filthy riches. You have made your money in sin, and I don't want nothing to do with it. But however, he said he had some helpers, and he said, you can give them some money, but I don't want your money. And what he did was, with the amount of money that was rescued, he did something called a tithe. A tithe, by the way, is 10% of your wealth, or 10% of the money that comes in. And what Abraham did, Abraham was so wealthy because he gave 10% of everything he gained back to God. And so if you're in a tight corner, if you're short of money, I'm short of money, right? If you're short of money, believe it or not, give 10% of it to God, and the 90% that remains is worth 150%. I guarantee it, I've proven it. But despite this, so the kings are rescued, but despite this, the cities continued as wickedly as before, so they did not learn their lesson. In fact, it's amazing how all the armies of 5 cities couldn't beat the enemy, but Abraham, with just 318 soldiers, rescued them all. Now, we have a story. Continues. Jesus himself came to discuss some plans with Abraham. And in these plans, he discusses with Abraham that first of all, I'm going to give you a child. And Abraham had a child when he was 120 years old. And then he discusses how he's going to now destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain. But Abraham knows that Lot's in the city of Sodom. So Abraham starts negotiating with God that if you find, so many righteous people in the city, please spare it. So God agreed. But the number that Abraham gave, there was not that many righteous people in Sodom. So God sends 2 angels to go take Lot out. And in the process, a gang come over and they want to have, what can I say? They wanted to commit a homosexual act with these angels. But being angels, you can't mess around with angels, by the way. Do not mess around with angels. The angels, 2 of them, they made all those inhabitants blind, and then they literally had to pull out Lot and his family. And the reason being, they were so entrenched in their riches and their treasures. And the Bible says where your heart is, or where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. So if your heart's in the wrong place, then you're gonna suffer the consequences. And some people have recently committed suicide because the stock markets have crashed. So the angels pull him out. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him, and they brought him forth and set him without the city. And the angel said, whatever you do, do not look back. Run for your lives. And the angel told Lot to flee out of the plain. Escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. Is anyone familiar with the book Pilgrim's Progress? There's a book called Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, and the same scenario is outlined where this man called Christian, he flees the city of destruction. Now, the Bible tells us the fate of the cities of the plain. The Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire. Does anyone know what brimstone is? It's sulfur. Turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into what? Ashes. But Lot's wife, she turned round, because where was her treasure? It was in Sodom. And it was all burning. So as she turned round, she turned into a pillar of salt. And so Lot and his 2 daughters, they escape. And they say to the angel, listen, let us go to this little city here. It's only a little city. And so they go to this little city while all the other cities are destroyed. And eventually, Lot and his 2 daughters leave that city, and that city also gets destroyed. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and that which grew upon the ground. So everything was demolished. We've talked about who Josephus was. Josephus was a Hebrew historian at the time of the Romans, around AD 70. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him. For he appeared to them alive again the 3rd day, as the divine prophets had foretold, these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day. Then he goes on to say this, but Lot's wife, continually turning back to view the city as she went from it, and being too nicely inquisitive what would become of it, although God had forbidden her to do so, was changed into a pillar of salt, for I have seen it, and it remains to this day. So Josephus, who was at the time of Jesus, claimed that he saw the pillar of salt. That's what he claims. So, where did these events take place? We're now going to go to Israel. And here we're going to the lowest point on earth. Does anyone know where the lowest point on earth is? It's the Dead Sea. Has anyone ever been to the Dead Sea? It's a fascinating place. It's full of salt. And you can find all kinds of shapes at the Dead Sea. What does this look like to you? It's a turkey. See, you even find turkeys in the Dead Sea. And here, can you see this old man? There's the mouth, the nose, the eyes, and his hair. All kind of funny shapes. It's alright, it's not real, it's just salt. And there's also a place called Mount Sodom. Now, if you've got a place called Mount Sodom, do you think that's where maybe the city of Sodom could be? Now, some people would tell us that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were fictional, never existed. However, archaeologists found, something called the Ebla tablets. And the Ebla tablets, were in a place in Syria. And these tablets list the 5 cities of the plain of Sodom and Gomorrah. So now we find independent records from the Bible that 5 cities of the plain existed, which we find on the Ebla tablets. And this was the city of Ebla. And these were discovered in 1975 in Syria. So this proves that there were cities of the plain called Sodom and Gomorrah, and the other 3 cities. We also have another thing here. This was found in Assyria. It's called a Hammurabi Stele. Now this thing here, again, was discovered in 1901 and makes reference to Sodom and Gomorrah. So now we have independent proof that there were cities called Sodom and Gomorrah. And Sodom and Gomorrah was like any city we probably find today, and it was full of unlawful acts, if I can put it that way. That's why, again, it's called Sodom, because they committed the act of sodomy. And God said he rained down fire and brimstone, or brimstone being sulfur. And there people died and perished. Now, where do we find these cities? Where we see these little circles here on the screen, people have speculated that that's where Sodom and Gomorrah are. And most people claim that they are at the bottom or the southern end of the Dead Sea. Some people claim that these are the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, Barbedra and Numeria. But these are actually Moabite cities. Now, when they examined these cities, the reason why they think this was Sodom and Gomorrah is because they found burnt cities. They were burnt. And they found lots of charcoal and lots of remains that were burnt. But what did the Bible actually tell us happened to the cities? It says that the cities were turned to ash. So these cannot be the cities. Plus, the Bible tells us there were 5 cities of the plain, not 2. So these cannot be Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, let's recap. That these made war with Bera king of Sodom and with Bersha king of Gomorrah, Shinab king of Admah, and Shemember king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoim. And all these were joined together in the Vale of Siddim, which is in the Salt Sea. Now, some have speculated that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are underneath the Dead Sea. But it tells us that they had battle in the Dead Sea. So the cities cannot be in the Dead Sea. Now, and these went out, the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah and the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim and the king of Zoar. And they joined battle with them in the Vale of Siddim. But the Bible tells us that they joined battle. They went out of their cities into battle. into the Dead Sea. So the cities can't be in the Dead Sea themselves. They had to come out of the cities into the Vale of Siddim, which we're suggesting is the Dead Sea. Now, here we see the borders of Canaan. Okay? So the scriptures indicate the location of the cities. Does the physical evidence support that view? This is the Valley of Siddim, or what the Bible called slime pits, which is now today the Dead Sea. This is the River Jordan. The reason why it's called the Dead Sea, by the way, is because water comes in, but water does not come out. And as a result, the sea then becomes dead, and it's very salty. Nothing can live in that sea. Here we see the Dead Sea. It's a very, very huge place. And it's a very hot place as well. And the sea is so salty that you can actually float on it. Incidentally, by the way, when we went to the Dead Sea, if you go into the water, you can actually get something called Dead Sea mud. It's black mud. And when we went, we covered ourselves all in mud. I've got some pictures of it, but I wasn't going to show you. But you can cover yourself in it, and it's supposed to be very good for the skin. Now, what does he say now? Josephus says this. He says, the country of Sodom be now all burnt up. There are still the remainders of that divine fire, and the traces of the, how many cities? 5 cities are still to be seen. So Josephus is saying, not only did he find the pillar of salt of Mrs. Lot, he also claims that he can see for himself the remains of the 5 cities of the plain. So Josephus was able to find them. And at the time of Josephus, there was the Dead Sea. Therefore, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah cannot be in the Dead Sea. Now, some scientists still insist that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are in the Dead Sea. So they had this idea to put submarines, take a submarine, and they go diving down in the submarine, but they did not find the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, this is a satellite picture of the Dead Sea. Now, ancient cities, when they built ancient cities, they built them in symmetrical formats, either in circles, rectangles, or squares. When you look at a satellite picture, you can begin to see some shapes that look kind of symmetrical. And they found a number of these along the Dead Sea. And they found 5 cities. Now the Bible, when the Bible talks about these cities, normally, if I said to you, name some cities in United Kingdom, what's the first one you're going to name? Why? Because it's the biggest. Then what's the next one you'd name? Birmingham. Manchester. So basically most people, okay, I think Glasgow is bigger than Manchester, but anyway, most people name cities in order their size. And likewise, we can take the Bible list. The Bible names the cities in a particular order. When these cities were examined, they examined them by size, and so they attempted to put some names to them. Okay? Zoar being the smallest one, being the last on the list. And why do they think that these are the cities of the plain? I'm going to share with you why they believe these are the cities of the plain. In the desert near the Dead Sea are some unusual white formations. Now these 5 places are the only place, or should I say the only places where they find, okay, these unusual shapes and where they find brimstone balls. Now from a distance, these look unusual, don't they? And people drive by and do not even notice it. This is taken actually near Masada. Okay, it looks like walls. Look at that perfect triangle there. And they found exactly the same formation in these 5 sites, nowhere else. And guess what they found when they looked at these samples? Ash. me just turn back to that one. You'll notice here, can you see these little holes? Can you see how they're in a straight line? Almost evenly spaced. You don't really get that in natural formations. Now, these are sketches which they think these buildings could have looked like. That's what they found. That's what I thought it could be like. This is what they found. This could be what it looked like. And here they found what looks like walls, and this is what you find in castle walls. It looks very, very similar. Here you can see a picture of what a wall looks like. It looks very, very similar to walls. What does this look like to you? Looks like a sphinx, doesn't it? And they found these, right, very unusual formations in only those 5 places that were outlined. They don't find these anywhere else. And there you go, there's the Sphinx.
What's the Sphinx?
The Sphinx is just like it's a monument supposed to guard the pyramid. And interestingly, when they found these, there were Sphinx-like shapes. Guess what was nearby? Structures that look like pyramids. And also when you see these erosion patterns, it's exactly the same way you find on the Sphinx. Here we found what could be a ziggurat. A ziggurat is basically like a temple. And here you see even some caves. Okay, this place is Masada. Has anyone ever heard about Masada? Some years ago there was a little TV drama called Masada. But when we went to this place, someone had the bright idea, why don't we climb Masada early in the morning before sunrise so that we can see the sunrise from the top of Masada. And I can tell you, it was very, very steep. Very, very steep, very tiring. But we climbed up Masada, and I'm glad we did, because at the top of Masada, you can then look down and you can see an aerial picture of what's going on. So this is Masada, and look, you can see the city. This is what we can see. What does that look like to you there? Pyramid. Can you see that structure there? It's amazing when you see something from a different perspective, what things come out. And here we see a little pyramid structure. So it's not very clear. It wasn't the best of pictures I was able to take. See these little archways? And when you go there, it just crumbles in your hand. Here we see a castle wall. Can you see these little things here? So what did you do when the enemy used to come? You used to fire your bows and arrows and throw things over the wall. And here we see exactly the same formation. Exactly the same. Can you see that there? They even found some little skeletons in there. Guess what? All turned to ash. And here we see a close-up view. See these holes? How they're on a same horizontal line. And here's another one. See those little holes on the same horizontal line? That's Aaron, by the way, up there. I took a picture of him when he was there. See that there? Okay. This is the most compelling evidence. When you go to these places, and I've been there, in the walls, scattered everywhere, you find brimstone balls. And you have to look very carefully, but they're everywhere. Everywhere. And when you go within, I'll use the word cities, when you go within the city boundaries, okay, you find brimstone balls. As soon as you step out of the boundary, guess what? You do not find any brimstone balls. Within the boundary, you find brimstone balls. Outside the boundary, no brimstone balls. And there's only 5 places along the Dead Sea that have exactly the same characteristics. So what does the Bible tell us that we can expect to find? And that the whole land thereof is brimstone and salt and burning, that it is not sown, nor beareth, nor any grass groweth therein, like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim. And they also found that this sulfur is very unique. You have 2 types of sulfur. You have something called rhombic sulfur, okay, which is like in a crystalline format, and you have something called monoclinic sulfur, okay, which looks like that. Now the sulfur found at these sites is white monoclinic form, not the usual yellow naturally occurring rhombic form found elsewhere around the world. So sulfur is naturally yellow. This sulfur, okay, is white compared to yellow. Also, this sulfur that they found is compact powder in a ball shaped. You don't normally find sulfur in a ball shape. So white sulfur found at Gomorrah, naturally occurring sulfur from a geothermal region. Geothermal basically means from volcanic activity. So sulfur naturally is yellow, but this sulfur is white. Now when we were there, we also discovered not only do you find a ball in there, but you find it within a crust. What normally creates a crust? Heat, isn't it? Something that's been heated creates a crust. It's like toast, isn't it? You put your bread in the toaster, what do you get? You get crust. Same thing here. And here we found around this crust is burn rings. So we find a brimstone ball or sulfur ball within a crust surrounded by a burn ring. Unfortunately, I didn't bring my samples that have these burn rings, but I've got some other samples today. But I have seen this, burn rings. And here you see the sulfur balls. And it's interesting, the Bible uses the term, it rained fire and brimstone. And when you look at these places, it looks like basically raindrops of brimstone balls. And here you find ash and you find the balls within. Again, here you can see the brown rings behind it. And there's one right there. And here you see a large chunk, and there you go, brimstone, 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 brimstone. Now these have been analysed, okay, independent laboratories, more than one, have analysed these sulfur balls, okay. What did they find out? They found out, okay, that it is overwhelming sulfur. You can't really read the report, but basically the report states, okay, that the brimstone is very, very, very pure form of sulfur. And then when they gave them the white ash, they said it's just ash. Nothing special about it. But the brimstone balls was a very pure form of sulfur. And by the way, when you burn this sulfur, okay, it burns very, very powerfully, and it creates a very strong, potent smell. And I believe that when it rained down this fire and brimstone, the smell would have been so strong that I think the people suffocated before they were burnt. I think God in His mercy suffocated everyone so they did not experience the flames. Now in some places you find charcoal. Now some people have said that these places, or Sodom and Gomorrah, were destroyed by a volcano. Can that be true? Well, first of all, there is no volcano near the Dead Sea. That's one thing. Okay. Secondly, if we go to Mount Vesuvius, the famous volcano that destroyed Pompeii, this is what they discovered. The whole city was covered, okay, in lava. And then when they removed this lava, the whole city was preserved because of the lava. The cities weren't turned to ash. The cities are still stone and rock. And you can still see paintings. And you can even see bodies that were preserved because of the volcano. But the Bible tells us that the cities of the plain were destroyed and turned into ash. And the 5 places that were found is indeed turned to ash. Now it's interesting, you take somewhere like here in Pompeii, you don't find any brimstone balls. So, Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed by a volcano. And these 5 cities that they found by the Dead Sea were not destroyed by volcanoes. And all that sulfur did not get there by a volcano. Now, the Bible tells us these ashen cities are an example for us today. And turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemn them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that after should live ungodly. Now, God gives us all a choice what we do with our lives, like he did with Sodom and Gomorrah. They had an opportunity to learn from Lot. They had an opportunity to learn from the example of Abraham when he rescued them. But they decided to go on their same merry way. We're told actually that in the Bible tells us that Sodom and Gomorrah in the plain was a lushful, beautiful place. But then it was turned all to ash. It was like the Garden of Eden, but it was turned to ash. So, are these really the cities of the plain? How did they deteriorate so dramatically? Is this truly the real location? I believe so. The evidence is compelling. It's the only places you find brimstone balls. In 5 places. You go outside the vicinity, you don't find any brimstone balls. And the whole place is just full of ash. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them, in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. So these cities are not alive today. They're not on burning fire. There's not something called an eternal burning hell. But that is another subject. But interestingly, they're an example for us that live in our time. And what was their problem? They had fornication and they went after strange flesh. Hence this word, sodomy, comes from Sodom. And to me, the evidence is pretty clear. By the way, these funny patterns, some geologists claim this happens when you have extreme heat, something called thermal ionization. And you can see it very clearly, brimstone balls, brimstone balls, brimstone balls, brimstone balls, brimstone balls, brimstone balls. They are everywhere. Now the Bible says the wicked will end up as ashes also. And ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this, saith the Lord of hosts. What day is he talking about? He's talking about the end of the world. You remember on Friday night when we showed a picture of Noah and he was warning the people. And what did the people say to him? They thought he was loony, didn't they? They thought he had lost his marbles. But I'll tell you tonight, the Bible is very clear that just as Noah was proclaiming that the world was about to end, the same thing is going to happen to us in our lifetime, I believe. In this day and age, we are told there will be another time where there will be an end of the world. And what do people think? They think, I'm loony. But listen and look at the evidence. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them, in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. And we're told that this earth will come a time, will be cleansed by fire. So why did God destroy these cities then? Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom. Pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her and her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. So what's the first issue they had? They had pride. Do we have pride today? Do we have pride amongst nations? Do we have pride in our own hearts? Only by pride cometh contention. So when you get into contention with someone, maybe it's pride. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. What's sin? I. What's the middle of sin? I will ascend into heaven. This is what Satan wanted to do. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. That's what Satan wanted. And I will sit also in the place of control. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. We all have an I problem. We want to do our own thing and we want to live our own lives. That's what I stands for. Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom. What was the second one? Materialism. What's everyone so preoccupied about? Money, making lots of money. I remember when, many of the colleagues that I used to work with, they would work all the hours that God gave them just to earn a little bit extra money. That's all they did, work, until they got sick or divorced. Do you know anyone that's got divorced? And you know why? Because the husband or the wife would just work, and then their marriage will go nowhere. Materialism. So what do we have today? The Vale of Sidon was full of slime pits. Basically, slime pits was basically bitumen. And they made a lot of money selling bitumen. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought of your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body that raiment? But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. What was the third problem they had? Leisure time. Do we have too much leisure time? We have the TV, more TV. What do we do when we get home after work and after a big dinner? TV, video games. We have far too much leisure time. And what happens with leisure time? We become idle. This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of themselves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers. How many times when you're at work, do you hear someone using God's name in vain? How many times do you hear someone using the F word or the B word? Like Lot, covetous, that we just want to hoard, we just want lots and lots and lots of things. Boasters, blasphemers, disobedient to anyone disobedient to their parents? I hope not. None of you are disobedient to your parents, are you? Parents, your children aren't disobedient to you, are they? Because this was what's going to happen in the last days. Unthankful. Are you unthankful? If someone gives you something, do you ever say thanks? Do you ever let people know that you appreciate them? Unthankful. Unholy. Without natural affection. Truce breakers. False accusers. Do you ever lie about someone falsely and accuse them? Incontinent. That means they can't behave themselves. Fierce. Despisers of those that are good. This is what's going to happen in the last days. Traitors, heedy, high-minded, lovers of pleasures, more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away, ever learning, and never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. The men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly, which means holy. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was evil, only evil, continually. What's the fourth thing? Corrupt welfare system. Do you think we've got a corrupt welfare system today? It says, strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. So we should care and help, repair, fortify. When's the last time you've helped somebody that can't help themselves? The world is ripening itself for destruction. A day will come when this city of Derby will be destroyed. Because we have pride, we have materialism, we have leisure time, and we have a corrupt welfare system. Here's a fruit. We find this fruit. This is called a Sodom apple. And generally, when you have a fruit, what do you expect when you eat a fruit? Sweet and juicy. But believe it or not, this Sodom apple, on the outside, it looks very nice. It looks sweet. It looks very appetizing. But guess what happens if you bite into it? You get a mouth full of dust. A Sodom apple just gives you a mouth full of dust. And this is exactly what the world gives us. It looks good, it feels good, it's attractive, but when you partake of it, it just gives you dust. My appeal to you this evening is this. The cities of the plain have been found. I've got the evidence here on the table. Brimstone bulls. These bulls have been tested, very pure form of sulfur. We're told that Sodom and Gomorrah and those cities are an example to us today. The Bible also tells us, as in the days of Lot, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. My appeal to you today is this. We need to make a decision. I have to make a decision. You have to make a decision what you're going to do with this information and with this evidence.